vows. The other part of our wedding vows, our wedding vows, number one, and being a man, is that we have to understand what the consequences are. I personally feel today we don't really harp that much or live with our consequences. I think it's too easy for many to do things that really they don't think about what the consequences are or what they could be or what they will be. And much of that has to do with being a good father and a good priest for the family. Because that's part of our job, is to make sure they understand as children, you're going to do X, that means the consequences are Y. Are you ready to face the consequences? And many parents want to try to help in many ways. And a lot of times, and we're all guilty of this, I think, we try to take the consequences away so it lessens the blow. Sometimes those consequences and living with those consequences, as tough as they are, we still have to allow them to happen sometimes. It's a tough thing being a parent. It's a tough thing being a father. It's a tough thing, that way of being the boss, if you will. So just as we are married to our wives as men, and that's that continuum. That's that from God, Jesus, to us as men, as the head of the household, the priest of the household, to our families. We have to model those things. We have to model being God and being godly. So again, priest, the number one job is to get them to heaven. You do it through love, loving them. The foundation of that is love. It has to be. Again, if it's not that authentic, it's not going to happen. So as we're the domestic church, I mentioned earlier, we are the priests, and we need to be able to be willing to die for that. Because many times our intentions are good in being a father and trying and wanting to be the leader of the house. But we have to be the priest, first and foremost. Above and beyond being the protector and the provider, we have to be the priest. Now, I mentioned earlier, you can't give what you don't have. There's more responsibility involved. You have to know your faith. It's really impossible to come to church once a week, never think about your faith, never pray any day other than that one day, and to think you're going to get this. You have to do more than that. As a family father, as a family priest, you have to be able to know kind of the difference between right and wrong, yes, but you have to know why it's right, and you have to know why it's wrong. And you can't just fall back on, because that's what I read in church or I heard in church. Hearing it and knowing it is different than hearing it and living it. Because all of us, the best times we have, the times that we have learned the most is when we had to teach. If you've ever had to give a presentation, give a report, or communicate some important information to someone, and you know there's going to be some questions, you are as great a learner as you are a teacher at that time. And it's no different it's no different with our faith. When you have young children, little children, even older children, the first word they learn, I'm convinced of this, it's not mom, it's not dad, it's not no, it's why. We're going to bed at 8 o'clock. Well, why? And because I said so is not going to cut it anymore. It might cut it for a little bit. But their why has got to be big enough that they're going to be convinced, yeah, going to bed at 8 o'clock is the right thing to do. So as we learn our faith, it's one thing to learn your faith, but you have to know why. You have to anticipate the why questions, because they're going to ask it. And kids, this sounds kind of silly maybe, but I think that's why God tells us to act like children. Because in our own mind, we're asking why. And as we learn our faith, I can promise you, we will be challenged by some of the things we learn. Why do I do this when I'm supposed to be doing that? Why do I keep committing the same sin over and over again when I know it's wrong and I'm still committing it? Of which we're all pretty much guilty of from time to time. So a big part of that why is also helping them to understand what the consequences are for those things. What the consequences are for why. I want to do X, and I've got Y, the letter Y, as one option, and I got the Z on the other option on the side. When you help kids understand the why, when you ask yourself the why, and you're able to answer the why to your children, being that modeled priest that you should be and are challenged and called to be, is really what your answer really holds value, is in the why. The last point I want to make is part of the value as being the priest of the family. I'm in marketing and I enjoy selling value. That's what I do. So value is based on your perception of what something's worth. I heard this, I can't remember where it was, but I heard this and it was kind of one of those aha moments. So the value that I am to God is what? Think about what the value you are to God. And if you don't feel like you're valuable, think about this. You're valuable to God because He gave up the most valuable thing of His for you, which is He gave up His Son. The value He places on you is the death on the cross. As a father, as a family priest, the value I want to perceive or let my children know of how important they are to me, the value I have in them, is how I reflect and die to myself and give to them. That they're always going to be ahead of me and my needs and what I want. In a strange way, that's something I really learned from my father. He was never first. He was never the most important. He was never taken care of first. We didn't know that. He didn't say it. But he modeled that. He modeled that in a way that I knew I was the most important thing to him. Not just me, but us kids. And so that's just so innate to me, as it is, I'm sure, to many of you. Being a priest has a lot of responsibility. It calls for us to be more than ourselves. It calls us every day to learn, to live, and to be the example of how we want our children to be modeled and how we want our wives as well to be in church and to get to heaven.